to MCNA Prime Time. Welcome to MCNA Prime Time. Here are the class rules. Sit straight and pay attention to the video. No talking during the class. Remember to say salam. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam.
Let's say Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful.
Rabbi shrah li sadri wa yassir li amri wahlul uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli.
My Lord, expand for me my breast with assurance, and ease for me my task, and untie the knot from my tongue, that they may understand my speech.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our 9th Seerah class. Let's begin by reviewing what we learned from last week's class. Last week, we learned that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam left Quba on the 5th day with Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu. That day was on Friday. So during their migration, they all stopped at a nearby valley to pray Jummah. When the Prophet entered Medina, he was welcomed by a lot of happy people. The people of Medina recited a beautiful poem for him. This poem was called Tala al-Badru alayna. The people who traveled from Mecca to Medina were called Muhajireen. The people who already lived in Medina and who helped the Muhajireen were called Ansar. Ansar means helpers. Because of the helpfulness of the Ansar, the Prophet and all of his followers felt love and safety while living in Medina. This was very different from how their lives were while living in Mecca. In today's class, we're going to learn more about the life of the Muhajireen while they lived in Medina. When the Prophet first arrived in Medina, he had to choose where to live since he did not have a home yet. Because of the excitement of the Ansar, there were so many different people who offered Prophet Muhammad a place in their home. Everyone was hoping that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would stay with them. However, instead of choosing a place for himself to stay in, the Prophet decided to follow his camel instead. He responded to the Ansar's request by saying that his camel is guided by Allah. This meant that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam kept his faith in Allah, and he trusted that Allah would help his camel find a safe house for him to stay in. So, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam rode his camel around the streets of Medina, and he patiently waited as his camel walked around looking for the right place for the Prophet to stay. Finally, the camel found a place and stopped walking. The only problem was, his camel stood in an empty area where there was no house. This confused the Prophet, and he thought that his camel might have stopped there by accident. He thought maybe she was too tired and wanted to rest. So he made the camel stand up and walk around the city again. Once again, Prophet Muhammad and his camel walked around the streets of Medina until his camel finally stopped again. For the second time, the camel stopped in the same spot again. This time, the Prophet knew that the camel was not mistaken and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose this as the perfect spot for him to build his new home. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam noticed that at the place where the camel sat down, there was also a small house that was nearby. This house belonged to a man named Abu Ayyub Ansari radiyallahu anhu. The Prophet decided that until he finished building his house, he would stay in the house of Abu Ayyub radiyallahu anhu. When Abu Ayyub radiyallahu anhu learned that the Prophet would be living in his home for a few days, he became extremely excited and quickly invited the Prophet over. Subhanallah! Imagine having the beloved Prophet stay in your home. What a blessing that would be. Now that the Prophet and his followers were finally settled in Medina, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam made a goal to spread the message of Islam and to build a community where all the Muslims can peacefully practice their religion. One of the first things that the Prophet did was build a home where he and his wives can stay. But not only did he build a house, he also decided to build a mosque right next to his own home, where the camel sat down. During the time of the Prophet, the people did not have a lot of materials to build big, strong buildings like we see today. So, with the help of the Ansar and his companions, the Prophet built a beautiful masjid, which was made of mud bricks, palm leaves, and tree trunks. After the masjid was finally built, one of the companions of the Prophet, whose name was Abdullah bin Zayed radiyallahu anhu, had a very strange dream. In this dream of his, he heard someone reciting something, but he did not know what it was. Abdullah bin Zayed believed that what he heard in his dream was so beautiful, so he rushed to the Prophet to tell him about this dream. The beautiful recitation that Abdullah bin Zayed heard in his dream was called the Adhaan. Do you guys remember what the Adhaan is? The Adhaan is the call to prayer. Before the beginning of any salah, a person who is called the muazzin recites the Adhaan. This is a way to inform the Muslims that it is time to pray. When the Prophet heard about Abdullah bin Zayed's dream, he knew that the Adhaan was a beautiful way to call all the Muslims for prayer. So, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam asked his other companion, Bilal ibn Rabah radiyallahu anhu, to recite the Adhaan at the new mosque and to say it loud enough so that everyone in the city can hear him. This was the first time that the Adhaan was ever recited, subhanallah. The masjid that the Prophet built was very important because it was a place where Muslims were finally able to pray. In Mecca, the Quraysh gave Muslims a very hard time and would hurt them if they ever tried to pray in public. So the Muslims had to pray in secret. But now that they can finally pray together, it was very exciting for everyone. It was also the place where people would come together to discuss important matters and to make important decisions. Today, this mosque is called Masjid al-Nabawi. Many Muslims from around the world come and visit this holy place. As we mentioned in the last class, the Ansar and the Muhajireen had a very close bond. They formed a brotherhood, which meant that both the Ansar and the Muhajireen would help each other in times of difficulty, and they also became close friends. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam wanted to make sure that the Muslims and the non-Muslims were living together peacefully. The Quraysh in Mecca were very harsh and unfair with the Muslims. So, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam formed many rules and many agreements with non-Muslim tribes. He did this to make sure that the believers would not be hurt and that there is peace among all the people living in Medina. So now, the Muslims in Medina were finally living together peacefully and happily. However, the Quraysh in Mecca were very unhappy that the Muslims migrated and that they were now able to live a peaceful life in Medina. They wanted to find ways to make life difficult for the Muslims, just as they did when the Muslims were living in Mecca. They would encourage their non-believer friends to get into fights with the Muslims and to try and hurt them in any way they can. The Muslims tried their best to remain patient, and they tried to ignore the mean treatments that they were getting from some of the non-Muslims. Remember, as Muslims, we should always try our best to treat everyone with kindness. Even if people are mean to us, we should make sure to remain patient and try not to be mean back to them. This is why the Muslims tried their best to remain patient, but soon their lives were beginning to get in danger. After some time, the harsh treatment of some of the non-Muslims became more and more serious, which worried the Prophet. The lives of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions were once again in danger because of the Quraysh. Because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave the Muslims permission to fight back against the Quraysh. He only gave them this permission so that the Muslims can protect themselves against any harm. After this, there were many battles fought between the Muslims and the non-Muslims. These battles were known as the pre-Badr battles. We have now come to the end of our story time. From every story we learn about the Prophet's life, there are always special lessons that we can take from it. Remember, the Prophet is our role model, and we should try our best to be as kind and faithful as he was in his stories. Now, let's look at some of the lessons we can learn from today's story. What do you think you can do to be more like the Prophet today? Well, the first lesson we learned is that when the Prophet had to choose a place to live, he decided to put his trust in nobody but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Even though he could have chosen any house, he knew that whatever Allah chooses for him will be the best option. Similarly, when we have to make a decision, we should trust only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because only He knows what is best for us. The second lesson from this story is that when the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and all of his companions were building the masjid, they worked really hard to make sure that they can build a mosque where they can pray in together. This is a lesson for us, because if we work hard and have faith in Allah, then Allah would make our tasks easier for us, and He will help us get a good result. That is why we should never give up, and we should never lose our trust in Allah. So, if you have a difficult project to do, or if you have to study for a test in school, remember to always try your best and to also make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so that He can help you succeed. The last lesson that we can learn is that the Ansar and Muhajireen had a very close bond, and they always helped each other. This should be a lesson for us. Sometimes, when a person comes to us and asks for our help, we get very annoyed or angry with them. Sometimes we feel lazy and we say no to helping them. But we should remember that as Muslims, it is our duty to help everyone, especially our Muslim brothers and sisters. Being helpful is a way of making sure that Allah will be pleased with us, and He will give us good rewards. Can you think of any other beautiful lessons that we can learn from this story? Be sure to share it with your family and friends. And also, don't forget, in order to be the best Muslims we can be, we should try to copy these lessons and to repeat the same actions that the Prophet and his companions used to do. I will also try my best to make sure to follow the teachings of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I also hope that all of you awesome people will also try your best. Now that we're finished with story times and all of the lessons, let's jump to the quiz. Are you ready? The first question: The Ansar wished that the Prophet would A. Stay in their house, B. Give them money, or C. Give them food. The correct answer is A. The Ansar wanted the Prophet to stay in their house. Question number 2. How did Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam decide whose house to stay in? A. He looked for the biggest home. B. He decided to stay in the prettiest home. Or C. He decided to follow his camel. The correct answer is C. The Prophet chose where to stay by following his camel. Good job, guys. You guys are doing amazing. Whose house did the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam stay in? Was it A. Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu, B. his uncle's home, or C. he stayed in Abu Ayyub radiyallahu anhu's house? The answer is C. The Prophet stayed in the house of Abu Ayyub radiyallahu anhu. Question number 4. What did the Prophet build when he came to Medina? Was it a mosque? Or B, a school? The correct answer is A. The Prophet built a mosque. Good job, you guys answered 4 questions already. Are you ready for the next ones? Question number 5. What did they use to build the mosque? A. They used metal. B. They used mud bricks and palm leaves. Or C. They used plastic. The correct answer is B. The Prophet and his companions built the mosque out of mud bricks and palm leaves. Question number 6. What did Abdullah bin Zayed radiyallahu anhu dream about? A. He dreamt that someone was reciting the Adhaan. B. Someone was singing a song. Or C. Someone gave him food. The correct answer is A. Abdullah bin Zayed had a dream that someone was reciting the Adhaan. Good job, guys. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 7. Who recited the Adhaan for the first time? Was it A. Abu Bakr radiyallahu anhu? Or B. Bilal ibn Rabah radiyallahu anhu. The correct answer is B. It was Bilal ibn Rabah who recited the Adhaan for the first time. Question number 8. Why was the mosque so important? A. Because it allowed the Muslims to be very, very rich. Or B. Because it allowed the Muslims to pray together. The correct answer is B. The Muslims were able to pray together in the mosque. Good job, guys. Now we just have 2 more questions. Do you think you can do it? Question number 9. What is the mosque called today? A. It is called the Kaaba. Or B. It is called Masjid al-Nabawi. The correct answer is B. The mosque that they built is called Masjid al-Nabawi. Now the last question. The Ansar and Muhajireen were A. Always helping each other. Or B. Always fighting. The correct answer is A. The Ansar and Muhajireen were always helping each other. Well, that's the end of the quiz time. You guys did amazing. Great job. Now it is time to do a fun little activity. Are you guys ready? Before we get started, make sure to grab a pencil and a paper. Great, let's get started now. For today's task, you guys have to draw a masjid, just like the one that the Prophet built with his companions while living in Medina. Okay, let's get started now. So the first step of the masjid is you have to draw a big rectangle, just like the one that's shown in the video. When you guys are finished with that, you have to draw 2 long rectangles on top of the big rectangle. Okay, the next step is to draw a triangle on top of the long rectangles, just like what you see in the video right now. When you guys are finished with that, now you need to draw a door so that people can enter the masjid. So in the middle of the big rectangle, draw a door. Now you also have to draw some windows on both sides of the masjid. You can draw as many windows as you like. Okay, we're almost done. Now all you guys have to do is draw a big trapezoid on top of the big rectangle just like the one that's shown on the screen. When you guys are finished drawing the trapezoid, draw a big semicircle on top of the trapezoid. That is called the dome of the masjid. Now for your final step, all you guys have to do is color it with very nice colors. Great! When you guys finish, don't forget to send it to your teachers. Good job, guys! You all did so well, mashallah. Now, we're going to show you some homework that was completed by some of our awesome students. Keep watching!
Assalamu alaikum. I'm gonna tell you about the Persian Prophet Muhammad and his best friend. And you know why there's a spider web and a bird laying his nest in a bush? It's because Allah ordered a spider to make a web, a bird to make a nest with eggs, and a bush. So then the enemies couldn't find out that Prophet Muhammad and his best friend were inside it. This says, guardsmen, they are not here. And then the guardsmen said, but we looked everywhere to find them, they said. And then the king of the Quraysh said, let's just check somewhere else, okay, with the exclamation. And then they said, fine. And then when they went away, Prophet Muhammad and his best friend said, like, they didn't say that, but this says, Muhammad and his best friend said, phew. Thank you, bye.